In the quiet countryside outside Roanoke, Virginia, a forested ridge once hid one of the state's most isolated religious communities, the Sisters of Saint Wayfare, a small convent established in the 1940s by an order known for solitude, charity work, and strict vows. For decades, the convent was a peaceful landmark, its white chapel steeple peaking above the treetops, its garden supplying vegetables for local shelters, and its 5 resident nuns known for their kindness to every passing traveler. Then in October 2002, all 5 nuns, Sister Miriam, Sister Helen, Sister Rose, Sister Magdalene, and Sister Clarissa, vanished without warning. At first, the sheriff chalked it up to a mass departure. But their rooms were untouched. Meals were mid-preparation. Prayer books lay open. Candles were still burning. The convent door was left ajar, though the nuns always locked it. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry, and no footprints leading away. The FBI joined the search, combing the forest, riverbanks, and the convent's cellar tunnels. But they found nothing, not even a scrap of fabric. 5 women, bound by vows, discipline, and a predictable life, simply ceased to exist. The case grew cold. Families mourned. The convent was abandoned. Then, 9 years later, in 2011, a kayaker on the Roanoke River reported something drifting in the current. 5 pieces of fabric, tangled together on a submerged log. When authorities pulled them out, the discovery chilled them. They were the religious habits, the signature garments, of the 5 missing nuns. Clean, preserved, untorn, and every habit had the exact same strange marking at the collar. That discovery would unravel one of the darkest, most bewildering mysteries in Virginia's history, and expose something the Church had tried to bury decades earlier. The convent's final evening had always puzzled investigators. Nothing about the place indicated panic or chaos. If anything, the building seemed frozen in time, like the occupants had been caught mid-breath. That night, Sister Miriam had been preparing lentil stew. The pot was still warm when investigators arrived the next morning, suggesting the event, whatever it was, occurred just after sunset. Sister Rose had been writing a letter to her niece. Her pen was left uncapped. The ink smeared where her hand must have jerked away suddenly. Sister Magdalene's rosary lay on the floor, one bead cracked, likely stepped on. But the most disturbing detail was the chapel. Candles surrounding the altar were still lit when the sheriff arrived, something the order never allowed unless sisters were present. A hymnal lay open to a song titled, "Guide Us Through the Shadowed Valley." Another coincidence? Or a clue? But the strangest clue came from an elderly groundskeeper, Mr. Harlan, who reported something odd that night. He claimed he heard a bell ringing in the forest. Not the convent bell. It was too small to be heard from that distance. He swore it sounded like a much larger, deeper bell, but there was no church within miles. Investigators dismissed him. The report was never logged. But years later, after the habit surfaced, his statement would return with terrifying relevance. Forensics ran full tests on the convent. No fingerprints beyond the nuns were found. No tire tracks led to the property. The surrounding woods showed no signs of disturbance. The only anomaly was a pattern of deep impressions in the soil behind the convent, almost like something heavy had rested there. Geologists who reviewed the photos years later concluded the imprints were not caused by equipment, vehicles, or natural formation. The shape was too symmetrical, too smooth. One analyst said the impressions looked almost like the base of a large cylindrical object, as if something had been placed in the clearing and then lifted again. But in 2002, no one took the idea seriously. Authorities ruled the nuns voluntarily left. Case closed. Families protested. The Church quietly recommended patience and prayer. And Saint Wayfare fell into silence. No one returned to the property, until the habits appeared downstream and reopened everything. The kayaker who made the discovery, Levi Harmon, initially thought he'd snagged a bundle of old curtains. The fabrics were unusually heavy when waterlogged, and the current kept dragging them downriver. When he pulled them ashore, he froze. These weren't curtains, they were 5 identical nun habits, perfectly preserved despite 9 years in the wilderness. Authorities rushed to the scene. The garments were laid out on tarps, their black and white fabric glistening in the afternoon sun. Each habit carried the name tag of the missing nun, stitched by hand. But the forensic team noticed a detail that sent shivers down the spine of the lead investigator. At the collar of each garment was a faint, circular burn mark, as though from a heated metal ring. The shape was consistent across all 5 habits. Yet the fabric around the burn was intact, no tearing, no signs of removal. It looked almost like the habits had been pulled through the ring, though the ring itself was nowhere to be found. When analyzed, the burns contained trace amounts of hematite, a mineral not found naturally near the river. More disturbingly, the edges of the burns contained microscopic metallic dust, unlike any composition local experts recognized. The church denied knowing anything. But an archivist from the Diocese of Richmond later came forward anonymously. He revealed that Saint Wayfare had once been connected to an internal investigation involving unexplained lights, unexplained sounds, and a historical artifact sealed beneath the convent's foundation. He didn't elaborate. He simply ended his email with, "The habits resurfacing means the artifact is no longer at rest." The FBI reopened the case. Search teams scanned the riverbanks. Divers searched downstream. Drone footage mapped the water flow. The habits had been deposited at a bend in the river with no upstream access. The current didn't align. Flood patterns didn't align. No storm in the previous 6 months could have delivered them from upstream. It was as if the garments had been placed in the water, intentionally. And when investigators followed the current backwards, they found something disturbing. A narrow tributary that led almost directly behind the abandoned convent. A tributary that, according to old maps, once fed a hidden subterranean drainage shaft beneath Saint Wayfare. A shaft sealed off in 1971. At least, it was supposed to be sealed. When investigators returned to the convent in 2012, they brought new tools, ground-penetrating radar, high-frequency acoustic mics, and a forensic excavation team. The convent was sinking, its floors warped from years of neglect. Moss crept up the outer walls. The chapel spire leaned at a dangerous angle. Yet the air inside felt strangely preserved, as if something had been waiting. The first major discovery came from the basement. Behind a rotted wooden cabinet, a section of stone wall had been crudely remortared. When torn down, it revealed a sealed iron door, one that did not appear on any architectural records. At first, they believed it was a forgotten storage room. But when they forced the door open, the smell that escaped was metallic and cold, like rain on iron. Inside was a narrow chamber lit only by flashlight beams. And in the center sat an antique tape recorder. Dusty, rust-covered, but miraculously intact. When forensic techs replaced the batteries and spooled the tape, a voice crackled through the speaker. It was Sister Miriam, dated 2 months before the disappearance. Her voice trembled. "We hear it again at night. The bell, low and deep. It comes from the river, and sometimes from beneath us." A second voice, Sister Rose. "We found the shaft open again. The padlock is melted." Sister Helen whispered, "It's not human." Another recording followed, dated just days before they vanished. Sister Magdalene spoke, breathless. "Something is in the tunnels. We heard footsteps though no one was there. The cross on the chapel wall keeps turning. We can't make it stop." A final recording, Sister Clarissa. "If anyone hears this, know that we stayed because we were told to protect the artifact. But we are afraid it is calling back whatever marked it. Forgive us if we fail." The tape ended with a loud metallic hum, followed by a deep, resonant gong, the same unidentifiable bell sound reported by the groundskeeper years earlier. Investigators stared wide-eyed. The church, notified of the tapes, requested them immediately. Agents refused. But the moment the convent case unit declined the church's request, strange events began happening around the investigation team. Events suggesting someone, or something, wanted those tapes kept buried. Following the clues in the tapes, investigators turned their attention to the sealed drainage shaft behind the convent. They dug for 2 days, exposing layers of broken stone and concrete. On the 3rd day, they reached a rusted metal grate. It had been cut, not by saws or tools, but melted, the edges fused into smooth curves as if exposed to extreme heat. The shaft dropped downward into a man-made tunnel. Air from below drifted upward, icy cold, yet carrying no smell of rot or decay. When the first investigator descended, his voice came through the radio in a shaky whisper. "You're not going to believe this." At the bottom lay a circular chamber carved from smooth limestone. The middle held a platform covered in dust, where something had once rested. And on the wall behind it was a perfect circular impression, like a halo or a ring, burned into the stone with the same metallic residue found on the nuns' habits. This was the artifact site the tapes mentioned. Old church documents found later, hidden deep in the diocese archives, provided fragments of context. In 1850, a glowing metal ring was unearthed along the Roanoke River by local miners. The church seized it, deeming it anomalous. It was stored under Saint Wayfare for safeguarding. The ring emitted sound when disturbed, described as a bell tone. It was to remain sealed indefinitely. But the records ended abruptly. Whatever the artifact truly was, it was no longer in the chamber. Someone, or something, had removed it. When investigators searched the room further, they found scrapings on the stone floor, drag marks, leading to the drainage tunnel and eventually toward the river tributary. Lab analysis later confirmed something even stranger. The metallic dust around the chamber was not from Earth's known mineral catalog. The church insisted they had no knowledge. But an unredacted memo found in an old archivist's cabinet suggested otherwise. The ring is not to be touched. It calls for what once surrounded it. Never let it hear the water. In 2002, the ring must have been disturbed. The bell-like hum, the footsteps, the melted locks, the markings on the habits. The artifact had awakened, and what it summoned was coming. After mapping the tributary connected to the convent's underground tunnels, investigators realized something horrifying. The path of the drag marks, starting from the artifact chamber, matched the exact direction in which the nuns' habits later surfaced 9 years later. Something had moved through the tunnels. Something had reached the river. Something had carried the artifact with it. The final breakthrough occurred when a technician enhanced the ending of the last audio tape. Hidden beneath the hum and distortion was a faint, terrified whisper. "It's taking them." At first, agents assumed it meant a person or animal. But when they compared the metallic hum to known sound databases, they discovered an eerie match, not to machinery, but to infrasound produced by certain naturally occurring electromagnetic anomalies. Some experts theorized the artifact might have been a resonance stone, capable of producing low-frequency sound waves. Others suggested it wasn't a religious artifact at all, but an object of unknown origin. A physics consultant brought in privately was more blunt. If the ring emitted sound, light, and heat, it wasn't made here. The disappearance of the nuns, then, became clearer. The sisters had been guarding something they didn't understand. The artifact awakened after decades of silence. It called something from underground or beyond. The nuns faced whatever arrived, and only their untouched garments were left behind. But the most chilling discovery came when investigators re-examined the habits released in the river. Forensic microscopy revealed something embedded in the fabric. Tiny circular grains, metallic, unfamiliar, and arranged in a pattern. not randomly embedded, deliberately placed. The grains formed a symbol, a perfect ring, the same size as the artifact. Interviews with church officials grew tense. One retired bishop finally broke down. The ring was never meant to be on this earth. It calls back what it once belonged to, and those who guard it must be prepared to answer when the call is returned. The bishop refused to say more. When asked where the artifact was now, he simply replied, "Lost in the river, or taken back." The case, lacking physical bodies, remained officially unsolved. The convent was demolished in 2013, but locals still report something odd near the river on quiet nights. A deep, resonant bell tone echoing across the water. Not from any church, and not carried by wind. Something deeper, older, searching. The disappearance of the 5 Sisters of Saint Wayfare remains one of Virginia's most chilling cold cases. No trace of the women has ever been found. No bones, no personal items, no blood, nothing but their 5 religious habits drifting quietly down the river years later. And yet, the clues left behind tell a story far stranger than simple foul play. The melted locks, the humming tunnels, the disappearance without struggle, the recovered garments marked with an unknown mineral, the metallic dust, the ancient ring, the recordings of fear. Something happened beneath that convent, something the nuns tried desperately to warn others about. Maybe they were victims. Maybe they were guardians. Maybe they were taken because they stood between the artifact and what sought it. The church will likely never reveal the truth. The files will remain sealed. The tunnel is gone. The chamber is buried. The artifact remains missing. But the river remembers. Those who live nearby still claim to hear the bell echo at night, long after the churches have gone silent, an impossible sound drifting across the dark water. A reminder that the 5 nuns did not simply vanish. They were claimed, and whatever claimed them may not be finished.